Little Christian clasped his hands together as he felt the cold waters of the dark river rushing round his body. Hopeful kept close to him and tried to hold him up, but the little pilgrim soon lost his footing and cried out, "I'm sinking! The water is all going over me!" "No, it is only rough," said Hopeful. "Do not be so frightened. I can feel the ground at the bottom of the river, and it is quite firm. We shall cross safely, and then we shall have no more trouble." "Perhaps you will cross," whispered Christian faintly. "But I'm sure I cannot. I shall never see the king, and I did so wish to live with him always." "You will live with him. Look up, Christian, and don't think about the water. We can see everything quite clearly now. The city is full of light, and the shining ones are waiting for us at the gates." "Oh, they are waiting for you," said Christian, "not for me." And then his head sank down on Hopeful's shoulder, and for a little while he did not seem to hear anything that his companion said. But Hopeful held him tightly in his arms and prayed very earnestly to the king to help them both in this last trouble. Presently little Christian opened his eyes, and as the light from the celestial city fell upon his face, he cried out suddenly, "Oh, I can see it all now! It shines like the sun, and I heard the voice of the prince. He said, 'I will be with you in the waters.'" "Then I'm sure we need not be frightened," said Hopeful. "Take hold of my hand again. The prince will never break his promise." So little Christian's courage came back to him, and he did not faint or tremble any more. Hand in hand, the little pilgrims made their way across the dark river, and after a time its bed seemed to grow firmer, and its waters were less rough. Then they saw that the two shining ones who brought them down to the river were waiting to receive them. In a few moments the dreadful passage was over. Gentle hands drew them out of the water, and they stood safely upon the shore. The celestial city was built upon a hill, and a broad, straight road led from the river to its gates. This road was steep, as Vainhope had said when he pointed out the little winding path which Ignorance had taken. But Christian and Hopeful did not find it difficult, for the shining ones held their hands and took care that they did not slip. "We shall soon be in the city now," said Christian, who had forgotten all his fear and sorrow, and could only look up at the bright walls and gates which rose before him. "Yes," replied the shining one with whom he was walking. "You will see the king in his beauty, and he will receive you as his own child." "Will he really let me live in his city always?" "Yes, and you will never be tired or sad any more. You will have work to do for the king, but it will be easy and pleasant, and you will love to do it." The little pilgrims were now very near to the city, and a band of the king's servants who'd been watching at the gate came quickly down the steep path to meet them. "These are two of the king's little pilgrims," said the shining ones, "and we are bringing them home to the celestial city." Little Christian had left his armour on the other side of the river, for he would never need to fight again. And now he looked down anxiously at his clothes. He tried to take care of them, but he knew that they'd become dirty and dusty during his long journey, and he feared that the king would be displeased when he saw them. But the waters of the dark river had washed away all the dust and stains, and even Hopeful, whose clothes had been dirtied as well in Vanity Fair, found that his dress looked as fresh and new as it did when he first received it. Close to the walls of the celestial city, a number of men were standing with silver trumpets in their hands. When Christian and Hopeful came up to them, they blew their trumpets loudly to let the people in the city know that some pilgrims were waiting to enter into the king's presence. Little Christian and hopeful stood transfixed as they listened. Then the shining ones told the children to knock at the gate, and the king's servant looked down from the archway and took the rolls which they gave to him and carried them to the palace. The rolls were sealed with the prince's own seal, and when the king saw it, he was glad and desired his servant to open the gates at once and to bring the little pilgrims before him. Unraveling the roll, it read, "The truth will set you free." The people of the city had heard the sound of the silver trumpets, and they all knew what it meant. When Christian and Hopeful passed through the gateway, they found a great company waiting to receive them with songs of welcome. Everyone looked glad and happy, for there was no sorrow in the celestial city, and no weariness and no pain. At first, the children's eyes were dazzled by the golden light which shone around them, but by degrees they grew accustomed to it and were able to look up. Before them, in the middle of the city, rose a very stately palace, far more glorious than the Palace Beautiful. "Does the king live there?" whispered Christian. "Yes," he was told. "And when you have knelt before him and seen his glory, you will be perfectly happy forever." As the little pilgrims reached the threshold of the palace, the doors were thrown open and they heard a sound of the very sweetest music. The prince himself was waiting to receive them, and he smiled upon them and took their hands in his own. Then he led them into the palace, and the whole city was filled with joy because their pilgrimage was over, and they'd be brought safely through the dark river into the presence of the king.